You know, when you hear the word political change, I mean, one would think that it would take a little bit of time, at least give it a quarter, 2 quarters, or maybe 6 months or 1 year or 2 years. But sometimes some of these political changes really don't determine by the timing that you give them. It happens right in our very own eyes, just like we are experiencing in Nigeria, with some of us who bought a pint of Gary for 600 naira, buying it right now for 2,500 naira, just less than 2 years ago. And right now in America, they have a new president. A lot is changing in our own eyes. And that would include maybe even having your brothers or your sisters who have illegally migrated to the United States been deported back to the country. That has happened with Mexico, has happened with Colombia, and some other countries, especially even India. And we're hearing that more than 3,000 Nigerians are already in detention camps to be deported back to Nigeria in due course. But then again, what are the implications of these tariffs, this deportation on countries around the world that has been initiated by the United States? We're live with the public and international affairs analysts, Dr. Stan Ukeja. Good to have you. Good morning.
My pleasure.
I mean, when he was campaigning, he was true to his words. A few days into it, we're seeing just as he says. I mean, sometimes when politicians make comments, you say, look, you know what, just let them assume office first. By the time they get into office, some certain things would play out and they would retract some of the things that they have promised. But this doesn't seem to be the kind of person we thought he would become, shying away from his promises. That is playing out right now. But then again, what we are living with is implications of what the decisions would be with, some of these tariffs and deportation. How did you receive this message, and where do you think America is headed with some of these latest crazy tariffs and even their misdemeanor, or if you like, the arrangement and engagement that they have with other countries?
Well, even after his first term, till the election, Trump was the issue throughout. So it's not surprising, because the way I see it, his unlike his counterparts in Nigeria who depend on holding office for income. He doesn't depend on it for income. It's a perspective. You may not call him an ideologist, an ideological person, but he's driven by some perspective. And that perspective has following. Following. It's only remarkable that the media that is fed internationally, the ones we listen to here, tended to be against him. But those who read Fox News or listen to Fox Radio and television knew that there was, a groundswell of people who demand that things should be done differently. Yeah.
Right. And when you say people demand that things be done differently in terms of tariffs, I mean, I'm not sure that people demanded that Donald Trump, makes other countries pay tariff, because, I mean, there will be implications. Those people are going to also do the same thing. And the only people that would, suffer for it are the consumers at the end of the day, not even him, because he's going to have all the pecs of governance during the times that he's going to be president. So I'm wondering where, the following came from with putting tariff on products of other countries.
I think if you know the U.S. economy well, it shouldn't worry too many people. 25% doesn't mean 25 naira or $25. It's just a percentage, and it's targeted. If you followed the campaign, you notice that the labor unions in the United States did not endorse the Democratic Party, which they used to do, because blue-collar workers felt, left high and dry. Let me just give an example. Motor manufacturing. The first two motor manufacturers in the world were Ford and Mercedes. Mercedes of Germany and Ford of the United States. Of course, later General Motors came, then Chrysler. But you'll find that in the United States now and around the world, US cars are not prominent. In fact, it took Obama's regime to help Ford to come back, when they redesigned SUVs that some people started consuming in Nigeria. In fact, one of the things that Obama said was that he can't understand how US will be importing cars from Korea. That we thought that, the US taught the world how to manufacture cars. How come now they are consuming it from abroad? After the Obama injection of, what you may call empowerment here, to restore motor manufacturing, in Michigan, under Biden, and it appears to have declined. Now, if you remember that from the 80s, there was what was called globalization. These labor unions in the United States, because they are powerful, they are politically linked, they tended to exert a lot of influence on business. So many of these manufacturing companies now broke their processes. Maybe they got their tires from Bridgestone in Japan, got their electronic components from Bosch in Germany, all kinds of systems. So if you come to an assembly plant in the US, you find that maybe 80% of the components are made outside the United States. That left a lot of workers without job. So they are not happy. One, the businesses were earning more because the labor in other countries were cheaper. They made the same products at a cheaper rate. Maybe some people may say not as efficiently as the US, but the businessmen will argue that the labor unions in the United States were too strong, that people were even heady and not very efficient, unlike the Chinese, who were very obedient in their culture. They did things as they were required to do it. So the labor unions were not happy. Now, what this tariff will do when it is targeted, because the US, Canada, and Mexico formed a free trade zone. I think it started under Reagan or so. They call it NAFTA, North American Free Trade Area. But when Trump came in his first term, he said he did not agree with the design and forced a change. And they changed the name to US Mexico-Canada Agreement. Now, there were some fundamentals in that agreement. One, that the trading partners should not use forced labor and child labor. In Mexico, there are a lot of gangs there. Forced labor, child labor. They were agreed that illegal products like narcotics should not be traded. But Mexico were trading in narcotics. and flooding the U.S., especially a particular drug called fentanyl. Good. Now, Canada is has been a liberal country for a long time. The current prime minister who has resigned, his father, Pierre Trudeau, was also a prime minister. They are French speaking, but they are in Canada. You know, the things that Trump does not like or Trump supporters don't like happen in Germany, in Canada. You know, same-sex marriage, you know, all kinds of things. Liberal. Now, you find that part of the U.S. complaint is that Chinese firms that have affiliation with Canadian firms bring in inputs. They do so the same thing in Mexico. So components of products exported by Mexico and Canada to United States had Chinese inputs. And in free trade areas, you do not allow third-party goods to take advantage of free trade. But, I mean, the Chinese are very clever. They do it, and they make things cheap. So the United States have been complaining, but nobody has complained as Trump has complained. Now, on balance, Mexico, 87% of Mexico's exports is to United States. 85% of Canada's exports is to the United States. The US exports to Canada and Mexico is only 33%. So the arithmetic is there. They are going to suffer, even though they impose retaliatory tariffs on the United States. They will suffer because where the ordinary people will find it difficult is in groceries, you know, like vegetable things like that. But the thinking in the US is that many of those products can be made in the US after some time. Once the prices become comparatively higher, the US producers will take over. Although in the immediate run, there may be disruptions.
Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. The immediate run is the issue because it's too sudden, it's too immediate. If you were something that you have spoken about for a long time, you know, they would have done some sort of cushioning effect, whether having more people get into that space to produce that particular product. Because, I mean, having said that, really, is it the best time to do some of these things? Because some persons think that it's not even making any sense. You are saying that the fact that you are allowing fentanyl coming through your borders into my country, that's the reason why I'm placing tariff on you. I mean, shouldn't have been something else? Like, wouldn't have been some sort of discussions amongst the government? Why throw a tariff for something like that? Because again, as it stands, he has gone back on that particular thought. That particular policy has been suspended for 30 days for both Mexico and Canada. Don't you think it's a false start for him?
No, on the contrary, it is the policy that compelled Mexico to call the Mexican president, called Trump, and said, yes, let us start from somewhere. That immigration into United States from Mexico, we are going to invest more in stopping people from just walking into the US. Therefore, we are going to deploy about 10,000 troops. And we are starting immediately with those troops that are available. On your own part, we are requesting you to ensure that high capacity weapons, like assault rifles, which are freely traded in the US, does not come into Mexico. Because these gangs you are talking about use those high capacity equipment for operation. Trump said, well, if you are going to do this, I will pause this tariff for 30 days. Mexico agreed. Because if it had happened, Mexico will, it's an unstable country. Very unstable.
What about Canada?
Canada, you know, after if you follow the news, the Canadian Prime Minister even made a broadcast addressing himself to U.S. citizens over and above the head of the president, which was really, I mean, in the 19th century, that could have caused war. But I think the businessmen in Canada also approached the Prime Minister, who has resigned, who is going to leave, to say, look, cool it. You can't beat this guy. So they now said, okay, we are going to identify one big cartel that has been trading in fentanyl. They knew it all along, but they didn't want to mention it. They said, we're going to, you know, arrest the person, announce his name. Then we will appoint a drug champion who will be against. Now you are talking.
Yeah, but again, that would have happened over a cup of tea.
But
that
they have been
happened
talking
over some sort of discussions.
Yeah, you know,
why have to threaten a country with tariff just to get this done?
That is why I say that it was demand driven. If the supporters of Trump were not demanding performance, you know, maybe he could wait. At the same time, if Trump was a politician who was waiting for the next election, or you know, he could just be doing calculation. I don't think he's in that field. So it's like a sea change. You know, he was not a career politician. Look at compare him to Biden. Biden had been in the Senate since 1973. He was not a career politician. You know.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the impact on Africa. I mean, the most interesting exchange between the new American president and Africa, we've seen one in South Africa, and we've seen a little bit of movements along the Congo axis. But the one in South Africa is one that is quite, you know, interesting, given that the minister, one of the ministers for petroleum there, is saying that they should stall whatever resources we're giving to America, because United States of America's president is looking to, you know, stall aid to the country because of what Cyril Ramaphosa is doing with land. And one would wonder, what is the President Donald Trump's issue with land in South Africa?
No, I see. This is the difference between Trump and many African, you know, what I call them big men. Like I said now, you know, Trump represents a community of people who want things done differently. Take for instance, now you are a news person. Let's assume now that you are hired by CNN to work in the United States. You are from here. It should occur to you that if you live in an area where, you know, there are, compared to yourself or relative to yourself, there are 20 illegal immigrants from our own community who do all kinds of things to, you know, get by. Most people will look at you the way they look at them. Because they will say, well, these your people, or these people. In other words, there are even immigrants from different countries, different parts of the world in the United States who are not happy that people from their community are illegals and do things that create crisis for them. Like most Latin Americans, we are not happy that Latin American gangs come into the US, commit crime, you know, go forth and back. So for the African countries, I mean, it's just funny. If the US is so vast, what is the land in South Africa for Trump to be interested in? And if you look at the resource structure of the United States, I was surprised that the Canadian Prime Minister was boasting that they have nickel, they have this. US has many of those things, but because of the interest of some people in a green economy, they suppressed some kind of mining. US has more oil than any other country. And they started producing oil about 1912. Only they capped their own. But Trump is saying, we are going to free it. We're going to produce gas, we're going to produce crude oil to supply ourselves. So Canada is supplying them energy, it doesn't fly. Because if they change their policy, they will invest and take off. So I don't think some African countries are worried that the United States Agency for International Development, it has been cramped. But very interesting. I think yesterday I read a report in the Catholic Reporter, a United States Catholic Bishops newspaper, saying that the stoppage of aid from USAID has affected their performance. That about 50% of what they disburse comes from USAID. In other words, USAID is the champion.
Absolutely.
And while it is good to be generous, at whose cost? The U.S. deficit. The U.S. deficit is over 400 trillion.
But
and it's growing.
These are what make you the world power, isn't it? Doesn't it weaken you as a world power?
At whose cost? Because that is one of the causes of inflation. Because the prints, just like we do here, the U.S. Treasury issues bonds. And the people who are holding those bonds are from China, from Japan, from Korea, from Europe. And they are earning a lot of interest on the money. When you hear that the Central Bank of Nigeria has reserve, it's held by U.S. company, and the investment is in U.S. Treasury. So why should the United States be running deficits in order to run the whole world? And there are some people in maybe the Middle East whose anthem is debt to America.
So, but do you think this weakens America forward? I mean, China is there, we have France, we have Germany. Do you think that if these countries step up to that plate of providing some of these, very good health-related aids to these African countries, it would weaken America's strength?
China does not have the heart to do such a thing. China is rich because the United States opened its market for it. Many of the products that are made in China, the Chinese don't consume it because they are too poor to buy them. How did China become strong? In, I think, 1985, 87, there was a Chinese president that displaced Mao Zedong. He changed the outlook of China. China has a policy of always depreciating their currency, the yuan. They make it cheap in order that people can buy goods from them. But it's more expensive for those in China to buy foreign goods. Now, because the government controls business, the government says, if you want people in China to buy your goods, come and make it here so that it will be cheaper for them. Now, when those companies come, they are like Apple, Ford Motors, General Motors. The Chinese are an advanced society. They use their language for education. They spend money sending their people to the United States to study. So they dismantle those products and copy them. They force the companies to sign agreement with them to exchange their technology. Now, those companies make those products. If Apple produces a laptop, iPad in China, when it goes to US, the US treats it as a US product with little or no tariff. So China is gaining. Now, these are the things that Americans have been complaining about. And under Obama, I think they placed a restriction that American products made in China were to be taxed when coming in because you have outsourced the job. And a new expression came in, what they call nearshoring. In other words, instead of offshore, there will be near. It was that nearshoring that made U.S. companies to go to Canada and Mexico that are close to them. But you can see the Chinese have also penetrated those two places and are using them as conduits for supplying American markets, which is a problem.
Absolutely. On a final note, how do you think that Nigeria should engage with the United States? The coloration is not clear. I mean, everybody knows what the United States right now is all about. America first policy, that's what it is. But how do you think Nigeria should engage with America and Trump going forward?
The power of the United States comes from both its size and its openness. Any product that America consumes, it consumes it in such a large volume and amount that if it stops consuming it, producers will suffer. Anything that America supplies to the world, if it stops supplying it, the world will suffer. That is their power. And when they say make America great again, those are the things that are in their mind. Because many other countries do not have the capacity and the generosity of the American people. You know, the US, why many Nigerians rush to the US to get citizenship is that they have this system of nationality in which maybe by the time you are 15 or 18, you are entitled to Social Security. The government provides for you that when you are unemployed, you get something. When you are employed, you contribute to the pool. And that makes people consume. They don't panic about what, once they have money, they spend it. Especially the poor, they keep spending. Because if you're out of job, you will get money to spend.
Absolutely. All right.
Which other countries don't offer. So it makes the US a very large, open and strong economy. No other country offers that.
So as a country, we should be able to connect with America through their openness and also supply to them what they need in terms of what they consume even more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Stan Ukeja. I would have loved to continue this conversation on different fronts, given that the United States president stated that the U.S. would continue drilling, and I'm wondering if they drill even more of their oil, where would Nigeria be in that stead? Anyways, we will continue this conversation a little later. Stan Ukeja is a development economist and international affairs analyst. Good to have you this morning. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure being with you.